if you're living in the city and there's a nuclear blast near you that is less than 10 miles away, you can pretty much assume that the mushroom cloud is going to be big, assuming it's like a 5 megaton nuke. The mushroom cloud is going to be so big that it's probably going to be directly over you. So there will be some fallout raining on you, and it'll be direct, immediate fallout, probably within the first half hour, and it'll be ultra high dose gamma ray generating fallout initially. Later on, you'll have to worry about beta. Originally, it'll be gamma, and it'll be ultra high intensity, which means you need a factor of at least 500 to 1,000 attenuation. 500 is okay because if the stem falls directly on you, that's about 1,000 rads per hour. Factor of 500 reduces it to 2 rads per hour, which doesn't sound like much, but actually over 48 hours, that's 100 rads. So even that is too much. So a factor of 100 or 2 or 3 or something from a basement or just living inside the middle of your house, that's not going to cut it unless you get lucky and you don't have the stem fall on you and you just have peripheral fallout on you. Peripheral fallout means you're going to be at the unshielded a factor of 10 rads per hour. That's initially. So remember, most of the initial dose is only for the first 48 hours. So 10 rads per hour initial dose is bad because 10 hours to LD50, but don't forget you have some attenuation from being in the middle of your house, assuming it's still standing. So factor of 2, 3 down, it's no longer as bad because the rad dose is also decreasing. But that's really not that good. You have a very high likelihood of getting a lethal or partially lethal dose. That is, you have a chance of dying from it. So you're better off with the bridge. The only problem with the bridge strategy is that there might be some radioactive fine particles, so you might bring a respirator too. But you really only have to, probably only have to worry about that for a few days, because the fires they'll be burning on the ground initially won't be radioactive. It'll just be fine fallout. Most of that will be generated in the upper atmosphere and will land hundreds of miles from your location, except for the stem. That stuff will land in your nearby vicinity, but that's going to be mostly the hard stuff that is larger in physical size. Basically, the fine stuff will be carried a great distance by high altitude winds and probably won't settle next to you. So it's possible that you're actually protected from fine stuff because that's going to go far up and high up. But you're going to have to deal with the large particles that are highly radioactive that fall nearby. Well, now I know what I'm going to bury. That is food and water to last 2 weeks, assuming a nuclear war scenario with Russia over the Ukraine, somehow expanding into NATO. That's the most likely bug out scenario that we have in front of us right now. So that's kind of the one that everyone should be prepping for. And if you're living in a city, you're basically going to have to survive the initial blast wave and fires and the fallout. And well, if you've got yourself a deep basement, you're in luck. You're probably going to be able to survive the blast wave and the fallout, unless you are unlucky and you have a blast that's too close. But if you don't have one of those, then, and you don't afford a Atlas Survival Shelter's retrofit to your house, which if you're in an apartment you can't really have as an option anyway, then your best choice might be a freeway underpass. I mean, that's a lot of concrete and steel. And it might even be good for surviving the initial blast and avoiding the heat rays and third-degree burns from the fireball, because it'll shadow you. So overpasses or under / bridges, things like tunnels, that's basically might be the best bet. So for prepping for that, it means you basically need to be able to live under a bridge or an underpass, assuming it doesn't get knocked down, which it could, for 2 weeks. Because it takes about 2 weeks for radiation to drop to 1% of its initial rate, which sounds good, but actually is only good if the stem doesn't land on you. The stem will produce about 1,000 rads per hour. 1% of that is still 10 rads per hour, which is too high. So if the stem lands on you, you'll have to stay there for like 3 weeks. But otherwise, 2 weeks or maybe even 1 week is good enough. So it depends on what happens. Okay, so now, as we're gonna continue walking, those pops are a construction worker, but I'll pretend they're gunfire to give this more post-apocalyptic feel. So you basically need to be able to survive under a bridge for 2 weeks. Now, surviving under a bridge for 2 weeks, possibly even 3 weeks, is really hard if you don't have water. And you're not going to be able to carry water there at the last minute. Other things like food, sanitation, those you might be able to handle, like dragging with you at the last minute. But 2 weeks of water, that's per person. That's a lot of water. So really the primary prep of concern is to make sure you have water. And that means you might have to bury water nearby. Initially, for the first 48 hours, you're pretty much going to have to stay under the bridge and not come out at all. Later on, you might be able to afford a short trip out, and you might be able to grab something nearby, but you pretty much are going to have to stay under that overpass for a long time. So assume 2 weeks. So what exactly do you need for 2 weeks? I mean, according to the Army Survival Manual, you want to have at least 2 pairs of underwear per week. So you'll want 4 underwear. You probably want some changes of socks. You probably want some sort of shelter. The bridge is most of your shelter, but you may still want a sleeping bag or something. You'll want some food, but you'll mostly need water. And you also need any meds that you need. If there's any critical meds that you need to have, well, you'll need those too. Now it's just burying a small stash along with a food stash. But your main problem is water. You will need 14 gallons if you want to follow the 1 gallon per person per day rule. But you can probably get away with just like 7 gallons if you want to go for 2 liters per day. Depending on your climate and how friendly it is, you might be able to get away with less. Especially if you're not really cooking or washing and you're just only drinking the water. And assuming you buried it beforehand, you won't need to filter it, and it's not going to become radioactive or anything if you've buried it, and if it's in a sealed container. So you'll be good. And it's not going to become neutron activated or anything. So you should be good, if you can just bury the water. Now, this is really kind of practice for the second and third chapters of Eddie the Wire's book, How to Bury Your Goods. Because I already know what I want to bury, because I've already categorized my items, and I put that into the chapter 1 list. Now there's the when and the where part. Well, the where is pretty obvious. I want to be able to bury it near where I'm going to bug out. And where am I going to bug out? Under an underpass. because you're not going to be able to drive anywhere. Maybe the local neighborhood streets will be empty enough that I'll be able to actually drive to the underpass. Or perhaps I can drive part of the way to the underpass and have some preps in the car. So maybe if everything burns down or something, part of the car might remain or something, and I might have a locked trunk with stuff in it. So maybe you have your keys with you too. But you're pretty much going to be with only what you can carry. And water is pretty heavy. You're not going to be carrying 2 weeks of water. I don't care if you're built like Arnold Schwarzenegger, although maybe he could. But 2 weeks of water is a lot of water. You're going to be better off just burying your water nearby. And you're not going to be able to walk out from under the bridge for at least a couple days. So you're going to need at least a couple days of water, and then you have to be right next to a source of water for that to work. Otherwise, you need your full 2 weeks of water, or you just need to get lucky and have the local radiation dose be low because the fallout pattern happened to be favorable to you. But that depends on the direction of the wind and how many bombs there are, so you can't really do that. You basically have to assume you need your 2 weeks. Okay, now I'm gonna walk back. I took a different route than usual just to simulate a longer walk. And now I'm gonna walk back and we'll see how things go. That bridge, I'm thinking actually, in order to do that 14 days, you want at least, for half a gallon per day, at least 2 water bricks of 3.5 gallons, plus 14 days of food. And that could be 1 food brick. Within 1 food brick, you can fit 2 humanitarian daily rations, and you can easily remainingly fit 6 packs of 2-day bunker tabs. And bunker tabs, I'm calling these survival tablets that only give you like 200 calories a day, but they give you all your nutrients. So within a food brick, you could pack a 14-day food supply for 1 person easily. That doesn't require any cooking. So the first 2 days you get nice, glorious meals that are basically full humanitarian daily rations. Now they won't be warm because they don't come with a heating element, but they'll be like fairly nice meals, like MRE style. And an HDR is about the same size as an MRE, except it's meant to be full day. So get yourself 2 HDRs. They fill up half the food brick, and the other half of the food brick you fill with bunker tabs. So that's your 14 days of food right there. And your 14 days of water, well, that's your 2 water bricks. I'm even thinking that this idea of 2 HDRs plus 12 days or 6 2-day packs of bunker tabs makes like a standard food cache. A standard food cache of just 1 food brick. If that's not too hard to bury, and you can easily bring it around and carry it, and you can also easily stash it in your trunk along with shovels and other tools and a tarp to go bury it somewhere. And it's relatively fast because it's a relatively small object. So you could make a few trips, or maybe all at once, and easily bring 2 water bricks and a food brick and bury it shallow under a bridge some night. Of course, now the when part, so the where part is picked, the what part is picked, and now you need the when part. According to Eddie the Wire, Sunday nights and Monday nights are the quietest nights, on like patrols. So for crime, those kinds of things. So therefore, those might be the quietest times when there's like fewest observers and cars and stuff. So you might want to consider thinking about doing your burial on a Sunday or Monday night. And you probably want to do a practice burial first in the backyard, just to see what it's like, to get an idea for how deep or shallow you want to do the burial. If you think nuclear war is imminent, you don't really need to, which I think is the most likely thing, you don't need to do a deep burial. You just want this to be good for a couple years. It's more likely that something will happen in a couple years or even a couple weeks than 20 years from now or 15 years from now. And you may not even care about 15 years from now, depending on your age and medical conditions and whatnot. You may just be thinking about a couple years or 10 years. But I'm thinking that if there's anything that's going to happen, it's going to be within a couple years. That also means that my preps don't need to last more than a couple years. Fortunately, HDRs and bunker tabs are designed to last for a very long time. Bunker tabs have a shelf life of like 25 years, and HDRs will probably last between 10 and 20 years, depending on how old they are when you got them and what their inspection date is and things like that. So you might be able to just get that as a standard food cache. So how much does that cost? Well, the HDRs are roughly $6 to $10 each. $6 if you buy them in bulk, that is in cases. And bunker tabs are much more expensive, or well, per volume of stuff. So, but per day they're cheap. Bunker tabs, if you buy them in 2-day packs, you spend like $25 to $30 to get 10 days worth of food. So $2 to $3 a day per person for bunker tabs, which is not complete food. It's just the nutrient part plus like 200-ish calories, which on paper should be able to supposedly gives you the margin for survival. I don't actually know if I believe that, because I think you're going to be in a starvation mode the whole time. If you've got a big fat belly, then maybe it'll give you a weight loss program or something. But I think you're going to be burning your muscles and kind of starving the whole time. But it'll probably keep you alive, just like they promise. Those HDRs probably will keep you in relatively good shape the first 2 days. And really, that's the worst time anyway, when you have to kind of just stay absolutely still, avoiding the immediate effects of the fallout. So that's why. And this form of a cache might always be useful, because you always get, if you always do the same, 2 HDRs followed by 12 days of bunker tabs, it can become like a standard cache. And you always know you have 2 weeks of quote-unquote food in one of your food caches, be it that it's only 2 days of good food and 12 days of bad food.